Hey y'all, this is Sarah from The Sarah Carter Show. Thanks for listening to 3 Martini Lunch. What happens when we die? From Angel Studios, the force behind Sound of Freedom and The Chosen, comes an unprecedented deep dive into the phenomena of near-death experiences in the new movie, After Death. After Death makes a courageous venture into a hotly debated, mysterious subject by comparing near-death experience with cutting-edge scientific knowledge. Hear from experts in the fields of science, philosophy, and medicine, as well as firsthand experiences of people who have lived through death as they paint a fascinating picture of life in the next realm. This groundbreaking project responds to the soul's innate desire to find meaning in life and solace in the future. Come see it for yourself or pay it forward by providing a free ticket for others to see the film. Leave your preconceptions at the door and prepare for a never-before-seen glimpse into what the next life could entail in After Death, opening October 27th. Get your tickets today or pay it forward at angel.com/3martini lunch. That's angel.com/3 martini lunch. After Death, the end is only the beginning. Rated PG-13.
Welcome to the 3 Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Geraghty of National Review. 3 Martinis coming up.
Hey, very glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the 3 Martini Lunch, and Jim Geraghty is back. He has no idea what time zone he's in. He's pretty sure it's Monday, but Jim, most importantly, you're back safely, and for anyone who read the Morning Jolt over the past week, and I'm guessing there's a few more installations to come, perhaps, they learned a lot from what you learned over there. So welcome home. Sounds like it was a productive trip.
Greg, it is great to be back, and while I'm over there, I was, checking Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days, and I saw how much everyone raved about John Gabriel and Andy McCarthy and everybody who was able to fill in for me. And boy, there's just nothing like hearing about how everybody loves it when you're not there.
So, I took the likes.
Great. I'm glad. I feel like Wally pipped. I'm feeling a little,
Well, I mentioned that you were back on Monday, so I'm sure they were liking that too.
Okay.
That's how I'm interpreting it anyway. Andy and I had a hunch on Friday that I wanted to confirm with you. Did you specifically arrange your trip to run during the Jets bye week?
No, but when the schedule came out, I was elated. And yes, I did get back. As you mentioned, all this is set up by the Taiwanese government. We'll have more to talk about this week. But they managed to get direct flights from New York City to Taipei and back. So it's about 15 hours going out there and about 14 hours and change coming back because you get the jet stream pushing you a little further. But I got to New York around 11 o'clock in the evening, and there was just no way I was going to make it back to a train to Penn Station or anything. So I got to spend 6 hours of quality time in JFK Airport, going from Terminal 1, where they have some of the international flights, to Terminal 5, where the JetBlue flights are flying out, then flew to D.C., got back in time, but I was so tired, Greg, that I just hallucinated that the Jets and the Giants played a game with more punts than points, and that somehow the Jets managed to win after being down by 3 points with 24 seconds left in probably the most hideous victory in all time. I can't wait to see what actually happened, because that was a really weird hallucination.
I think what we've learned over the past couple of weeks is that the first 58 minutes just don't matter.
Yes, yeah,
that's how
you can tune in very, very late.
Exactly. I saw some folks saying that the ref never spotted the ball before the spike, and so the clock should have run out. But my theory on that, Jim, is that enough weird things have gone against the Jets over the last generation that you're probably due a few of those.
We're getting it, we're getting payback. Can't complain.
All right, let's get into our fare today. We do have good, bad, and I would say a double crazy as we dig into that later on. Two of them have to do with the presidential race. On Saturday, former Vice President Mike Pence was speaking to the Republican Jewish coalition, and it was at that point that he announced that his presidential campaign is done.
Last June, I announced my intention to seek the Republican nomination for President of the United States because I believe this country is in a lot of trouble. I was raised to believe that to whom much is given, much will be required. And with everything our country is facing, I just couldn't sit this one out. But the Bible tells us that there's a time for every purpose under heaven. Traveling across the country over the past 6 months, I came here to say it's become clear to me this is not my time. So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today.
Jim, one reason he might not have gotten much traction is it took him 52 seconds to say what he probably could have said in about 15. The dramatic pauses were once again quite prominent there, but this is a guy who, as a former vice president, usually that gives you a pretty good step up to win your party's nomination. Doesn't always work that way. You can ask Dan Quayle, but for Al Gore or Joe Biden, obviously, it's been pretty successful. But Mike Pence never got much traction, and he's seeing the handwriting on the wall here, and he knows that the longer he stays in, the more the non-Trump vote is fragmented. So we're inching closer to a field that's going to be considerably smaller by the time votes are actually counted. The question is whether anybody else is going to follow his lead here.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the outlook for Pence making the debate stage was not looking great, and I think he kind of recognized that was a sign that it was time to hang it up. I think that's also a sign to the likes of Tim Scott and Doug Burgum, folks who I like, but who I think if you are struggling to make this threshold, then it's not the time for the lesser known candidates. And Mike Pence is name recognition wise, if he can't make it, then probably a whole bunch of other folks don't really belong there. This will be a continuing theme in our martinis to keep people tuning in to the end of this. It's funny, I can think back to, it might have been like the Bush years, the Tea Party years, Mike Pence, I think when he was in Congress. And I've always liked those who are indisputably conservative, but who also can, pragmatic enough and focus on getting stuff done, not just, emoting on cable television. I remember saying, somebody like Mike Pence would be a good guy to run for president. And some of my colleagues were less enthusiastic about the idea. And, here we, fast forward 10 years, Trump picks him as his running mate. I think he served quite well as vice president. But as I wrote in today's Morning Jolt, there was always this really weird contradiction at the heart of Mike Pence's presidential campaign for this cycle. He was Trump's vice president, and you could argue right-hand man, or I think you'd say at minimum a staunch supporter up until Election Day 2020. And then Trump got it in his head that somehow Vice President Mike Pence could say, oh, I don't recognize those electors. I choose to recognize these other electors, and that Trump would just get to stay in office for another 4 years after an election that he lost. And this culminated in an angry mob storming Capitol Hill on January 6th and chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Now, Greg, I don't know about you, but if my running mate chooses to stir up an angry mob that tries to kill me, I'd hold a grudge. I'm that kind of guy. Maybe I should be more forgiving, but I would. My whole campaign would be, you can't trust Donald Trump with a remote control or with your network password. Never mind, giving him the controls of the executive branch of the U.S. government for another 4 years. And Pence would sometimes make comments along those lines, but he also would emphasize how proud he was to be a part of the Trump-Pence administration. Notice his name kind of gets stuck in there. But then he would go back and he would say Trump was utterly unqualified, and then he was leading dangerous populism and turning his back on the world stage and turning his back on the pro-life cause. But then Pence would turn around and say, refuse to say he'd vote for Trump in a 2024 rematch with Joe Biden. So there was this, it was a cliche that, Pence was too anti-Trump for the Trump crowd and too pro-Trump for the never-Trumpers. And a lot of times during this campaign, people would ask Mike Pence, how do you square that circle? How are you going to appeal when you got two groups in the party who really don't like you? And Pence would always kind of, oh, don't you let me worry about that. Well, actually, no, there was no good answer. He never got above 5% nationally in most of these polls. And there haven't been a lot of polls in Indiana, but I think the only one that they did was like 12%. That's his home state. So there really wasn't any room for Mike Pence. But I think he leaves the campaign with a certain amount of dignity intact. He's, was not afraid to criticize Trump often. And I think that people who might have thought badly of him as being some sort of yes man to Trump for 4 years probably think better of him now. So, Mike Pence, thank you for your service. Here's a gold watch. Vaya con Dios. Go enjoy your retirement. But 2024 campaign by Mike Pence never really made sense, and I think the evidence is pretty clear now.
Yes, because obviously he, his whole thing was that I'll stand with the Constitution every time, and in reference to January 6th. But then every time somebody else on the debate stage criticized the Trump administration for overspending or whatever, he'd have to defend it. So it's a totally contradictory issue. Meanwhile, the news came out on Saturday, I believe, and Trump was giving a speech in Nevada where he decided that, what really should be expected of Mike Pence now is an endorsement of Donald Trump.
Well, he only tried to kill me once.
So Trump says it should be obvious. I picked him for vice president. We had a great administration, but some people are disloyal. I wouldn't be waiting up if I was Donald Trump for that endorsement.
Hey, y'all. This is Sarah from The Sarah Carter Show. Thanks for listening to 3 Martini Lunch. We all have a heartfelt reason to support our blood pressure. In fact, more than half the U.S. population would benefit from blood pressure support. Superbeets Heart Chews are an easy and convenient way to support healthy blood pressure and promote heart-healthy energy. Paired with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in Superbeets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. And believe me, I know, because I'm traveling all over the country covering stories and frankly, sometimes all over the world. And it's so easy. I just keep my Superbeets in my handbag, in my pocket, wherever. And I've got amazing energy. And guess what? They taste really good. So supporting healthy blood pressure comes with a bonus. Superbeets Heart Chews support healthy circulation. So you not only get blood pressure support, you also get a productive, heart-healthy energy without the crash. Double your potential with Superbeet Heart Chews. Get a free 30-day supply of Superbeet Heart Chews and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using promo code Sarah. That's S-A-R-A. GetSuperBeets.com, code Sarah to get 15% off your first order. Getsuperbeets.com, promo code Sarah.
All right, Jim, let's focus on our bad martini now. This one's overseas, and we talked plenty about anti-Semitism in this country last week while you were gone on the podcast, especially with Scott and Inez. But there was this crazy footage from Russia over the weekend. Let's play a little bit of that. And what you have here is people storming an airport. Pro-Palestinian, they could be called, pro-Hamas, certainly anti-Jewish, because what they were doing here was swarming the airport, kicking down doors, eventually stopping passengers and checking their passports, even looking inside jet engines for Jewish people. And I'm pretty sure this was not the local welcoming community. So, Jim, this is from the Caucasus region. I don't know if this is like where the Chechens and the Boston Marathon type bombers are from, but this was clearly a crowd bent on violence, and thankfully they didn't find anyone to assault as far as I know, but this is pretty ugly how quickly this is spreading around the world.
There were times last week where I was getting some really fascinating information about China and Taiwan, a serious potential flashpoint in the world. And I couldn't begrudge people back in the U.S. for having only, mid-level interest, because this was the week American campuses basically decided to launch the American Intifada. And one of the things that's been kind of horrifying over these past 3 weeks or so is the degree to which Hamas launches this massacre of Israeli civilians, babies, little kids, toddlers, elementary school kids, all the way up to grandma Holocaust surviving senior citizens. And in the face of all of this bloodshed, how many people around the world did not react with, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is such a terrible thing to happen to the Israelis. But how many people responded to, this is our chance to really stick it to the Jews. And let's note that this angry mob over at that airport over in Dagestan, they were not looking for Israeli citizens or the IDF or the Mossad or Israeli government officials. They openly were telling people they're looking for Jews, right? And one of the clearest signals that someone is an anti-Semite, and not merely anti-Zionist, as the pleasant term as they prefer to use here in the West, is when they keep using the terms Israeli and Jew simultaneously as synonyms. Right? Not every Israeli is a Jew. They're about 18% Muslim, and 2% Christian, 2% Druze, and the Baha'i faith's main centerpieces out there. There's religious diversity in Israel. Obviously, it's heavily Jewish, no doubt. It's accurately can be called the Jewish state, but it's not. Again, Jewish is not. And of course, there are plenty of Jews who live outside of Israel. The two terms are not the same. So when you start saying we're looking for Jews, I'm going to take you at your word that this is not an objection to Israeli policies. This is not an objection to the Israeli government. This is because you hate and want to kill Jews. And that is straight up anti-Semitism. Those who've read, actually, ironically, some of my fictional work will note, Russian government and Russian society has a decent amount of anti-Semitism. And in these southern portions of Russian territory, where they have a lot of Muslims, you get a lot of Muslim-driven anti-Semitism. And the title, Between Two Scorpions, the work of my novel, talked about like what it was like to grow up in Russia, in which you have these two groups that hate your guts for, theoretically different reasons, but the effect is the same. What we see now, here's the thing, we've seen some very ugly sights in European cities. We've seen some very ugly sights on American college campuses. Apparently at Cornell, one of the buildings has been evacuated, and there's been on alert because of a potential bomb threat. A whole bunch of people have decided that this is the time to really stick it to the Jewish people. And these people, you notice you don't see a ton of these people who are thriving and happy and successful in their lives. Although a bunch of these university professors, I'm sure, are making a good living. No, they are frustrated with their lives. They are the losers of society, and they're looking for someone to blame. And the Jews will do quite nicely for these people because they are just full of rage and just looking for somebody they can take it out on. In a decent society, these people would be constantly reminded, no, you cannot blame Jews for everything. Your life sucks because you and the decisions you've made and the actions you've taken in your life. There is no vast Jewish conspiracy out to get you. But they don't get that on college campuses. No. They get told, well, you shouldn't be blaming every Jew, but the Israelis, well, it's okay to be anti-Zionist. It is and what you see at that airport out in Dagestan is the natural outgrowth of these attitudes. That when you're allowed to blame the Jews for everything that's wrong in your life, someday you show up at that airport, apparently a medical relief flight, looking around to find somebody. And my only wish, Greg, besides the fact that we could eradicate the scourge of anti-Semitism from the earth, is that idiot sticking his head into the plane engine just didn't stick his head in a little bit further, and we could have seen some Darwinism in action.
Little Raiders of the Lost Ark flashback in that situation, although that was a different type of engine. But I digress.
But same anti-Semites, you think about it.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, there's a long history there. Obviously, it goes back centuries. Quick exit question. Do you think Putin is encouraging this? Does he see this as a helpful distraction from the world condemning him? Or is this just something that's happening organically?
Look, anti-Semitism in Russia existed before Vladimir Putin rose to power. My guess is it will remain after Vladimir Putin is no longer in power. But we have no doubt that Putin certainly will not stick his neck out to defend the Jews of Russia or anywhere else. He has come up with the cockamamie crazy theory that Ukraine is full of Nazis and needs to be denazified, never mind the fact they elected a Jewish president. Putin says that he's got 17 Jewish friends, but I love the specificity of that. Like he counts, like he tries to keep track of, how many Jewish friends do I have? And he said that, well, he knows that Zelensky is not a real Jew because those 17 Jewish friends tell him that. Because, so in addition to everything else, go figure, Vladimir Putin gets to decide who's really a Jew and who isn't.
All right, let's talk about our great sponsor for today, and that is 4Patriots, makers of terrific products, including the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. We say it all the time. You don't know when your power is going out, so it's really helpful to be ready and keep those critical appliances running when and if that power does go out. Because at some point, it's going to. Could be weather, could be an accident in your neighborhood. You just don't know. Maybe you just blow fuses and it takes you a while to figure out what's going on. But nonetheless, if you want that fridge, that freezer, those medical devices to keep running and other appliances as well, Patriot Power Generator 2000X is the way to go. Solar generators charge more devices for longer in a blackout, and now with double the capacity and more power than before, plus new expandable capability for even more power. Won't have to spend a dime on gas, comes with a solar panel, and it's fume-free, silent, and safe. Visit 4Patriots. Phillips.com/martini to see this week's discounts and deals before they are gone, and get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, I promised a double-fisted crazy martini, and a double-fisted crazy martini we shall have. We know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is no longer running for the Democratic presidential nomination. He's running as an independent, which means there's, I guess, a void to fill. And Dean Phillips, the Democratic congressman from Minnesota, has made noise for a while about running. He says he would prefer other people to get in, but he will do it if nobody else will. And so he is getting in. He says the reason he's getting in is not because he doesn't like Joe Biden. Thinks he's doing a fabulous job, Jim, which we would obviously disagree with vigorously. But he says that regardless of Biden's outstanding accomplishments, the numbers just aren't working for him. He's behind in some of the swing states. His approval numbers are terrible. And so he's afraid that Biden is going to lose. So he is getting in the race. Not that many people have heard of him, obviously. But now the double crazy part, other than a guy who nobody really knows is running for president, is the fact that the grifting wing of the Democratic Party, who still call themselves conservatives, is having a conniption fit over this because they're obviously worried that it's going to damage Biden and could potentially help Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee is. So on Twitter, you have people like Victor Shi, who is one of these left-wingers who's trying to rally really young voters to support Democrats. He says, first of all, he's mad that Steve Schmidt of Lincoln Project fame and McCain campaign fame is now advising Dean Phillips. So this has led to a civil war between the current Lincoln Project guys and Steve Schmidt, which is always fun to watch. But Victor Shi says, I can't believe I platformed Steve Schmidt on my podcast. If I had known this, I never would have done it. His involvement in Dean Phillips' campaign is unforgivable and a betrayal of democracy. Yeah, another guy giving an option for you to vote for is end of democracy. Stephen Beschloss, not Michael, but this guy is a writer. He's an editor. He's got 400,000 nearly Twitter followers. By working for Dean Phillips, Steve Schmidt is telling us he cares more about money for himself than democracy. And here's my favorite one. This is from initially Tim Alberta over at The Atlantic, but Tim Miller of The Bulwark is very upset about this. But Alberta writes that the Schmidt strategy for Dean Phillips, get this, Jim, I know this is a radical approach. They want to put the Biden campaign on the defensive during this primary campaign. And Tim Miller says the idea of attacking Biden in a Democratic primary is insane. So I guess our standards of what passes as legitimate campaign tactics have changed here depending on who you want to win. But what do you make of Phillips getting in, and what do you make of the people lighting their hair on fire here?
Well, the first thing I want to so the Lincoln Project is accusing Steve Schmidt of unethical behavior and grifting.
That's right.
I need a scorecard. Wait a second. Let me check. All right. So this is like going into a funhouse mirror and pointing an you. I found the problem right there. You. And it's, I understand the Lincoln Project will soon split into a militant wing and a political wing, and then probably go to war with each other. So. Yeah, so that's problem number one there. So here's the most sympathetic thing I can say to about Dean Phillips, and something he genuinely brings to the race for the Democratic primary. As far as we can tell, he is a healthy 54-year-old male, which, let's face it, in this Democratic primary is an asset not everybody has. My colleague Kyle Mills pointed out that we have that, usually the Democratic primary challenger against an incumbent is like, look, I have real problems with this president. This president is lousing things up. We need a new direction. And the Phillips argument is, no, he's doing just fine. In fact, Phillips has voted with the Biden administration's position 100% of the time. He can't even point to a handful of issues where he's disagreeing with the Biden administration. So it basically is a sales pitch of like, I will keep doing exactly what the guy I'm challenging is doing. You just don't have to, the odds of me killing over in the next 5.5 years are much lesser, which is if he ever puts it that honestly, I'll almost be tempted to vote for him in a primary. I'm like Biden, but I'm just not geriatric, and I'm probably not going to die. That's soon, And And you think about it, you look at these polling, Dean Phillips can point to polling numbers that indicate Biden, but not old, is what the party says it wants. They keep saying that it wants an alternative to Biden, but whenever one gets put forth in front of them, RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, with her talk about, dark, sinister spiritual forces, and then my suspicion is we're not going to see Phillips really pick up much of anything. But on paper, this is what they say they want. The problem is that nobody has said, hey, you know who we need to run instead of Biden? A Minnesota congressman that nobody has ever heard of. That would be great. And so I feel like we have talked about this on the Republican side. We talked about this whenever there's a murmur of some semi-famous celebrity choosing to run. Like, if you want to run for president, people should have heard of you. I'm sorry. I know it seems unfair. I know there are probably a lot of very talented, bright people in this world who are not terribly famous, but I think some degree of the public knowing who you are and what you've done and what you stand for is a prerequisite for running for president. It is not something you can build while you are running for president. Dean Phillips, maybe you'll be great at this someday. I think being elected to statewide office helps. I think having run something probably helps. And right now, Dean Phillips does not, like, his entire notion of his campaign is, you're tired of the old guy we have in there, and I could be like him, except I'm not in my 80s. And I think you probably need more than that. We'll see how things shake out. I don't think this is really going to go anywhere, and I think there's a certain presumptuousness that comes with this idea that the country has been clamoring for you to run when nobody's ever heard of you.
Everybody loves the generic candidate, right?
And maybe he thought he was the generic candidate, but we all know that that's Tim Pawlenty.
He's not even the most generic candidate from his state. Yeah, that's Governor Pawlenty. Yeah. But we had the poll of, hey, what about a third-party candidate? And a third-party candidate came in second, I think, with Biden in first and Trump in a close third. And then they said, okay, how about if it's Joe Manchin? And then it's like way back. So it's like 60% of Democrats saying, we got to have somebody besides Biden. And then, okay, how about Dean Phillips? And they'll be like, no, can't be him. And then, then the attention will turn to Gavin Newsom, who's doing the world tour, but totally not positioning himself to run for president. But he's headed to Israel after playing basketball and mauling some small Chinese kid on the basketball court the other day. So it's going well.
I wonder how many Democrats, when you say, what do you think of Dean Phillips running for president, will say, didn't his whole thing fall apart because he screamed in Iowa? No, that's Howard Dean. Oh, well, never mind.
Close enough.
Yeah.
They just know it's Dean. So, Jim, anyway, welcome back. Have a great day. Hope you're acclimated to the Eastern time zone again soon, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Huh? See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Also, thank you for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Also, get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Geraghty. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Monday, and join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.